Okay, so today I am going to show you how to make a graph of the data that you found and just how to make sure that your tables are nicely formatted. And then we're finally going to look at how to write a trend statement. So first off, you should have already done your experiment, and in that you did one trial at each temperature. So at 12 degrees, you may have calculated 220 seconds. You may not have. I made up these numbers, so your numbers probably look different. Since we didn't do multiple trials, I'm going to ask you to get these trials from another group. So if you're in group 1, please ask group 2 and 3. If you're in group 4, please ask group 5 and 6. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3 will share data, and 4, 5, and 6 will share data. Your data should be in trial 1. And then the other 2, I don't care which order you put it in, but just make sure you have 2 other trials at your disposal. You don't need to write their notes. Normally you would do all the trials on your own. So just have the notes for your own trials. If you don't have any notes because they were all at the right temperature, that's fine. So the first thing we need to do is calculate the average of these 3 trials. The reason we have 3 trials is it makes it a little bit more reliable. If you made one mistake on one of your trials, it'll really impact your data. So if we have multiple trials, it'll just help us to ensure your data is a little bit more accurate. So you're going to calculate the average the same way that you always do, but I want you to show me the calculation that you're using, because in a lab, I always want to know exactly what you've done to find your numbers. So down here, you're going to show me how you find an average. So you probably learned that a mean or an average is calculated by adding together the 3 numbers that you've got and dividing them by the number of numbers that you have. So in this case, we've got 3 numbers. So we're going to add trial 1, trial 2, trial 3, find the sum. And then divide that number by 3. So I've already done that for my data for 12 degrees. I added 220 seconds, 230 seconds, 260 seconds. Please remember to write your units in there. I found the sum of those. I divided by 3 and I got 237 seconds. So now I'm going to plug this number in here. I also on my calculator just found the average for the other temperatures. So I'm going to put them all in right now. You only need to show me how you calculated them for 1, and then I'll assume that you used the same method to find your other 2. You'll notice in my graph, I don't have any units down here, and that's because all of my units should be at the top of my graph. So temperature is in degrees Celsius, so these are all in degrees Celsius. Time is in seconds, so these are all in seconds, okay? So now I'm going to put all of this information into a process data table. So the process data table is only going to use our independent variable and our three different temperatures we used, and then the averages we found. So I'm going to copy all of that into this process data table. I've already corrected mine, but yours should look something like this. So you're going to make sure that you have temperature, that you have your units in brackets, and then you have your dependent variable, which is the time it takes to fall in cup. Units are in brackets. So down here, we don't have any units. So now we're going to copy this table, and we are going to make a graph in Google Sheets. We're going to use Google Sheets instead of Excel because it'll look the same on all of our computers. So I'm going to open up a new tab. I'm in the internet right now, so just go to your Google Chrome, open it up, and you're going to search for Google Sheets. There's other ways to get to Google Sheets, but this is just the easiest because it'll look the same on all our computers. But if you did it another way, it should work just fine. So now I'm in Google Sheets. You'll notice I'm signed into my Branksome Google account. If you haven't done that, it may have prompted you to do that, so that's fine. Just sign into your Branksome Google account. If you're in your Branksome Google account, it's all going to be saved to your Branksome Google Drive, so you don't have to worry that it's going to be lost after you've done it. So we're going to open up a blank Google Sheet by pressing that little thing that had the plus next to it. And let's give this a title, and we'll just really quickly call it like Syrup Lab Graph, so we know what it is. You can label yours something else, but that's what I called mine. So now I'm going to paste my data into here. So you'll see my independent variable is on the left, my dependent variable is on the right. This is important. If it's opposite, your graph's going to turn out opposite. So just make sure you've got your temperature here and you've got your dependent variable, which is your time here. In these boxes, if you've put anything other than numbers, so if you've put like seconds or if you've put degrees Celsius, you need to erase that because it won't make a proper graph. So make sure that your numbers are on this side and that there's no letters or anything in there. Okay, once you've done that, you're going to highlight this whole graph, including our labels, and we're going to turn it into a graph. So we're going to click Insert, and then you're going to find what's Chart. So it looks just like this. You're going to click on that. You're going to wait, and it's going to magically appear in a moment. Wait for it, wait for it. There it is. Okay, so we are not going to use a bar graph. So our first thing that we need to do is switch from a bar graph. We only use bar graphs if we have discrete data, but we have continuous data. We have our temperature. We want to follow the regular number line at the bottom. So we do not want to use this type of graph. We want what's called a scatter plot graph. So I'm going to click on chart type, which is under data. That should have popped up on your screen. And then you are going to find scatter plot graph. So it's right here. I'm going to click on this. And then there we go. Now we've got a scatter plot graph. So you'll notice with my graph at the top, or sorry, I'll start with the bottom. At the bottom, we have temperature. So our independent variable should always be at the bottom and our unit should be in brackets. Since I already had done that, it's all there and ready to go. But if yours doesn't look like this, you need to click on it and fix it. So if you didn't have units in brackets, add that in, and then it should look exactly like this. Same goes for this axis, for our y-axis. Just make sure everything's there. We've got our units, and we've got a title. Now we need to do our title at the top. So for our title at the top, we always want to have it in the order of independent variable versus dependent variable. Right now we have it dependent variable versus independent variable. So let's just switch that. So I am going to just cut this because I'm going to copy it to the front, but you do it whichever way makes sense to you. So now I'm going to copy this in. And I'm going to say versus. So now we have independent variable versus our dependent variable. But let's make it a little bit more specific. So the temperature of what? Well, it's the temperature of the syrup. So temperature of the syrup, oops, versus the time it takes to fall into the cup seconds. So now we've got a pretty nice little label here. This is a pretty great looking graph. There's one more thing we need to add, which is a trend line. So in your science graphs, I always want to see a trend line. You do that by clicking on series, and then you're just going to click on trend line, and boom, there it appears. So for some reason, you cannot copy and paste this graph into your Word document. Instead, you have to export it into an Excel document. So we're going to do that. So we're going to just click on download as Microsoft Excel and click on that. And then wherever your downloads go, mine go down here, but if you have a Mac, it may have gone down here and you might have to find it. So I'm going to open up this download that I just made. There we go. And now it's going to magically open up in my Excel. There it goes. So what you need to do now is just copy and paste this. So right click on here, copy. If yours doesn't look exactly like this, really all I'm looking for is that you've got a title, that you've got a trend line, that you've got an axes label here with units and brackets, axes label here with the units and brackets. I don't really care if you have this legend. If you do, it's fine. Okay, so I'm gonna right click this, I'm gonna copy it, and I'm gonna put it right into my Word document. So here it goes. I just Control V'd, and now it is there. So anytime that we make a graph in science, we're also gonna make a trend statement. So we're gonna say, what's the trend that we can see in this graph? And we're always gonna write it in the form of independent and how that's impacting our dependent, just like we did for our hypothesis. So we're going to use the words as the independent variable increases, and here our independent variable is temperature. So as the temperature of the syrup increases, so if we're looking this way, as our syrup is increasing, what is happening to the time it takes to fall into the cup? So if we look at this, well, as our temperature increases, it looks like, according to our trend line, the time it takes to fall into the cup decreases. So as the temperature of the syrup increases, the time it takes the syrup to reach the cup decreases. So there we go. That is our trend statement. And I think it's very close to the hypothesis we made. So it looks like our hypothesis is correct. And we'll talk about how we're going to do that in our conclusion at another time.